And welcome back. Before the break, we spoke to Beto O'Rourke about what's going on right now in this country, the COVID outbreak, the government's chaotic response, and the financial crisis caused by the shutdowns, and much more. In this segment, we talked to the recent presidential hopeful about what happens next. We take a look ahead. We're going to start with November 3rd and what could come after. New polling out by ABC News and the Washington Post shows that Biden is leading Trump by 15 points, and it's not an outlier. Most basically have the spread at that. A handful of also recent polls have Biden up by double digits. Now in Texas, it's a state used to be deep red here. Believe it or not, it's a dead heat right now. And Beto, of course, was recently in the race. And here's part two of my conversation with him. Let me pivot ahead. All the polls, I know you've seen them, they show that there has been a sea change in terms of people don't want 4 more years of this. But where the unanimity, or at least the plurality, starts to fray a little bit is how big the next president should go. If they're going to vote Democrat instead of for this president 4 years later, what comfort level do they have? And we're having playing out, obviously, a racial reckoning in this country. We're hearing some people calling for defunding of police here. We're talking about the conversation of reparations. We don't have a platform yet for the Democratic Party. God knows where we are with the convention. But how would you counsel the party? Is the first priority to win so there's not 4 more years of Trump? Or is it go as big as you can? You know, this is like FDR 2.0, New Deal 2.0. That's where we should go. There's an electorate out there that knows they don't like what they see, but they're worried how far they want to go.
We've got to win, but it's not enough to win. We've got to win big. And that means winning in Texas. And I'll tell you why. Donald Trump, in no uncertain terms, signaled that if he loses this election in November, he won't accept the results. He literally would not tell Chris Wallace in an interview this weekend that if he were the loser, that he would accept the results. So he's been very clear that he's going to use the pretext of voter fraud and mail-in ballots, specifically where you have large Democratic victories, to try to call the results into question and conceivably order his attorney general to try to invalidate the results. What's the answer to that? I think it's Texas. The last time a Democratic nominee won this state was in 1976, believe it or not, 44 years ago. If Joe Biden wins Texas and the 38 electoral college votes here, there's no close margin which the president can exploit to create chaos and confusion about the results. The returns will be seismic in their impact on our consciousness and our acceptance that we're going to turn the page on the Trump years and begin a new chapter for this country. And Richard, to your point, yes, it has to be FDR in scale, in scope, to address the systemic injustice, to address the cataclysm of climate change left unchecked, which will consume the generations that follow ours. Deal with the fact that in my home state of Texas, more people are uninsured than in any other state in the union. You've got folks dying of diabetes and the flu, in addition to COVID-19 right now. So the challenges have never been greater. The urgency must meet this crisis. And in order to do that, we've got to win really big all over the map. And we've got to contest in the unlikely places, including in Texas, where, as you've probably seen, even in polls released by Fox News, the president is losing badly to Joe Biden right now. That's not going to roll of its own accord. We can't take it for granted, and we certainly cannot be complacent. But it means that we can win if we contest vigorously and give this all that we have.
I've tried, I'm not sure successfully. I've done some reporting along the border and also done a lot of pieces on Dreamers. And I've said to people, I don't care where you fall politically, if you've met one of these kids and what they've gone through, you'd want them part of America, talking about the Dreamers. Conversely, if you go along the border and you see what some of these people are running from and what they do to be part of America, again, you'd say, yeah, let's make them part of this fabric. And that's not Pollyannish. I really believe if they got to see it, just like if they went into an ICU and saw what was going on, maybe the skeptics would go away on COVID. How best to communicate, do you think, that we shouldn't be, as a nation, as afraid of immigrants? Not that anybody can cross whenever they want, but we should have immigration reform, and we'd be better off as a country on the other side if we do.
You know, to your point, I remember campaigning in the panhandle of Texas in 2018. I was running against Senator Cruz. And Richard, you will not find a redder part of America anywhere in the other 49 states. And I was knocking on doors trying to meet the voters that were going to decide the outcome of that election. And then I wanted to represent and serve in the Senate. And so after giving my pitch, I'd ask them what was on their minds. Almost to a person in this very red rural county, they talked about immigration and specifically dreamers because the valedictorian of that high school, who was himself a dreamer, had just been rounded up, deported back to the country of origin that he came from, whose language he didn't speak, where he no longer had family. And that community was moved because they knew him, they knew that he was nothing to be afraid of. And they also knew that he was very likely the source of the rejuvenation of that community. He was the best of us as America, and they had just lost him. So you make an excellent point. When we know those dreamers, when we know their stories, regardless of whether we're Republican or Democrat, rural or urban, any other difference, that doesn't matter. We just see them as human beings, and we see them inextricably connected, not only to the best of America in our past, a country of refugees and asylum seekers and immigrants, but the best opportunities we have going forward, which will largely depend on dreamers who are willing to make this journey to come to this country, not only for themselves, but for all of us, to make this a better place. And against that, you have President Trump, who has sought to do the opposite, to distance us from these dreamers, to dehumanize them, to vilify them, to call immigrants an invasion, an infestation, to describe them as animals. Those are all words that the President of the United States has used. And it's not just his words, it's putting these kids in cages after he's separated them by force from their parents. It's losing the lives of children who are in our custody and care, who die in detention because of the inhumane conditions in which we keep them. And it's the 23 people who were murdered in my community right here in El Paso, Texas, almost a year ago, August 3rd of 2019, killed by somebody who picked up the signals sent by this president's description of invasion and infestation and animals, and with an AK-47 killed 23 people because he feared that invasion and had promised to stop it right here by force. So this is what we're up against in this country right now, and it's incumbent upon all of us to share these stories of these immigrants and to share our larger story of America, which is the story of immigration and of refugees and asylum seekers who have made us better by their very presence. This is another facet of the 2020 election that makes it the most defining, decisive election since 1860. On every key issue, we are going to choose a very clear path one way or the other. And immigration is a perfect example of that. Deport every single person who's here, who's undocumented, including these dreamers, or make sure that they have a path to citizenship to contribute to their full potential to the promise of this country. That's the choice on the ballot in 2020.
Beto O'Rourke, I really appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
And up next, Congress has just 10 days to pass another COVID relief bill, or 30 million Americans are going to lose the increased jobless benefits they've been using to try to make ends meet. After the break, a congressman who will have a vote joins to discuss whether or not the two sides can come together in time to cut a deal.